There we go. Thank you very, very much. All right. Thanks for the introduction. Hello and welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us today for the, overview on 3ds Max. I'm going to focus a little bit on games and design visualization, although, as you will see in the first couple of slides I'm going to show you in a second, 3ds Max is really kind of a Swiss Army knife. So we have tons of industries using 3ds Max. So whatever functionality and workflow you will see within the next 45, 50 minutes, there will probably be something in there that, reflects your current workflow that you can benefit from. And there might be other things that you see as something that doesn't add any value for you. So you can start and cherry pick, I guess. But my intention is to give you a brief and holistic overview on some of the functionalities of 3ds Max that we have been adding over the last couple of years. So, as Stacy said, my name is Alex. I'm based out of Germany. I've been working for Autodesk since a while now as a 3ds Max specialist. Today, my main topics for you, which I've prepared, are talking about user experience, talking about viewport technology, talking about modeling functionalities. And then I also want to focus a little bit around rendering and shading as in OSL, open shading language, use of physical materials, PBR shading, but also dip our toe into the deep waters of how to leverage the power of Arnold inside of 3ds Max. I want to kind of round it all up with some mentioning of pipeline advantages like import functionalities, Alembic, Python, scripting support, all of that. I've just a handful of slides on that as well. All right. So hoping you're ready. As mentioned before, if you have any questions, please feel free to use the Q&A panel or the chat. I'm going to try and monitor both. And of course, we'll have some time for generic and general Q&A at the very end. All right. So who is using 3ds Max? And well, when I say everyone, what I mean by that is really like any industry you can think of. There might be a company on out as a freelancer who is working with 3ds Max on that. We have some of the big ones listed here. So you see a lot of media and entertainment over VFX, but also design visualization like IKEA, Neoscape, Wayfair, the e-tailing market. It's very, very, a very diverse industry that we see for 3ds Max. When I say everyone, well, it's seriously everyone. Here we have a designer creating pastries with 3ds Max on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side, some renderings for Love, Death and Robots for Netflix. But I guess overall, when we talk about 3ds Max, and we see all of these different creative markets, what we really see, what it cooks down to, is two main workflows. And this is content creation for visual communication on one side, and we have content creation for real-time experiences, whether that's a desktop VR or an online experience, augmented reality, e-tailing, doesn't matter too much. But generally speaking, you either, you fit in one of these pillars, I would say, and even there's an overlap. So that's, for the most part at least, that is true. Here are three examples on content creation for visual communication. Here we see traditional design visualization rendered by Neoscape within 3ds Max. So design visualization right there. Here we have Unimage based out of Paris. Predominantly they're creating commercials, but also game cinematics, which you see right here. And then we have Scanline VFX as another 3ds Max customized example, or leveraging the power of 3ds Max into, well, visual effects, movie production, TV, right? Then for the VR part or the real-time experience part, as you probably are aware, Autodesk is partnering with Unity, but we are also very open and very, I guess, very good to get the road done between 3ds Max and Unreal or Lumion or any other real-time engine that you could potentially think of. Last example here, real-time experiences, of course, that is indie games and AAA games as well. Here we see Red Dead Redemption 2 by Rockstar Entertainment being created inside of 3ds Max and Motion Builder and their own real-time engine. I guess at the end, it is fair to say that 3ds Max is helping artists to, to convey emotions and to tell their stories. And that is kind of true for any industry, whether that's design visualization, commercials, games, film, doesn't matter too much. So, and there it is, the Swiss Army knife of 3ds Max, right? So let's hop into some of the functionalities, shall we? User experience. I want to kind of mention this one because it has been a major focus for our development team over the last couple of years. Depending on which version of 3ds Max you're currently on, you might have experienced some of these efforts that we've put into the product already. So when I say that, it's predominantly talking about the user interface. So we are now supporting 4K or high DPI screens and displays. The icons, the text will scale accordingly to your Windows scale settings. You have most of the UI as a Qt-based user interface as well. So that means it is fully customizable. You can dock it everywhere, anywhere. You can store these customizations inside of your workspaces. You can create your own UIs by using scripts and scripting. So this is very, very versatile to work with these days. And I guess this is what you would expect out of one of the modern 3D tools that are out there. Another advantage that we've put into the product is the improved hotkey editor. And that's, if you play this out, this might seem like a small addition, but it really is something that a lot of users have been struggling, especially struggling when they upgrade from version A to version B and they want to bring in their hotkeys. There's always been some incompatibilities or some hotkeys that are getting overwritten by importing your legacy hotkeys and so on. So this new hotkey editor does a lot of that for you under the hood. So when you create your custom hotkeys here inside of the new hotkey editor, these customizations will be compatible to upcoming versions of 3ds Max. It's also, fully filterable. You can search for keywords and current hotkeys. You can visualize your created shortcuts. You can customize them, and it's all getting saved and stored within a text file, which you can bring along and import on any other versions of 3ds Max. Just a second here. I need to have some air here as well. All right, so user experience, one of my last slides on that specific topic, which is going to bridge over to the next one, as you will see in a second. Detachable key ports. Well, what is that? It actually means that you can dock or, detach your viewports out of 3ds Max, put it on a second or a third screen, and you have these floating viewports, which can be a 4x4, it could be a maximized screen viewport. You can customize those as well, obviously. And this really leverages your what you see is what you get productivity, right? It's because you can work on one main screen and have all your tools on the second screen, for example. This is something people have been wishing for a very long time, and it's now part of 3ds Max as well. All right, here we go. All right, so let's talk about viewports. So the viewport engine inside of 3ds Max has been updated drastically in terms of what it can display, how compatible it would be to your PBR materials, how far you can get with a preview, using the viewport as a preview instead of re-rendering all your changes over and over again. And we've come a pretty long, pretty far by now. So what 3ds Max is supporting currently is, as one of the new functionalities, is real-time ambient occlusion. If you have been working with 3ds Max in the past, you are probably aware that when you start manipulating the viewport, you turn your camera, you orbit around, the ambient occlusion would be gone and it would be re-added as a kind of a post effect onto your viewport as soon as you let go of the navigation and transformation. So now you have screen space ambient occlusion inside of the viewport, giving you a way better overview on your contact shadows, on the overall volume of your structures, and also giving you better feedback when you're starting modeling on your geometries inside of 3ds Max. The SCADA processing has been updated as well, so you have customization for the fade in time, like when the calculation kicks in for the skylight processing inside of the viewport. And with that, it gives you overall a very, very good what you see is what you get experience within 3ds Max directly without hitting any third-party renderer or the inbuilt Arnold renderer and so on. Clear code support, that's also something that talks quite a bit to how far physical materials are now compatible to the viewport. So clear coding has been one of the things that has been missing. So you wouldn't be able to display, for example, roughness or clear coating or some other effects inside of the viewport. You would have to render these functionalities out. Now, clear coating, again, is one of the examples that we've added as a supported preview inside of the viewport in 3ds Max. But there's more. There's always more. Viewport enhancements are talking to full PBR support for physical materials, that is, right? We are also supporting Arnold photometric lights inside of the viewport. That's again something that you would not have been able to do in previous versions of 3ds Max. And you have better and fully automated image-based lighting inside of the viewport with any environment that you're adding in here. And one of the, I feel, very, very big ones is the support for physical material roughness. So the roughness itself, we would not have been able to preview that inside of 3ds Max previously, right? So that was one of the big deal breakers for me personally, where I would say, okay, physically based materials, where we have normal maps and we have our diffuse and all of our shading information is nice, but without displaying the current roughness amount, it all falls apart. So now that is added, and now we can talk about having full PBR support inside of 3ds Max with added depth of field and ambient occlusion in real time. All of these things are working nicely. All right, so this is just a screen grab from the 3ds Max viewport that you see here. I really like where this is getting and going, right? All right, so let's talk a little bit about modeling. The next slide is going to feature some functionalities that have been inside of 3ds Max over the last 1, 2, or 3, even 3 years. But quite a few of them are very important, right? So as an example, we added extrusion capabilities inside of 3ds Max. Extrusion has always been a functionality, of course, but now it's less destructible. And you can do more things in a more reliable fashion and manner. There are spline tools inside of 3ds Max. Only a few people know about these. So these are added capabilities to create and modify your splines. As you can see here, there's a freehand tool where you can just draw in splines. There's a new spline relax, which is much more reliable. Normalizing splines, much more reliable as well. You have an overlap modifier. So if you draw splines with an intersection, you will automatically, with that modifier, be able to, well, not collide, but overlap with these splines to draw in wires or ropes. It's fairly easy. With a new normalized spline, you can do exactly, define exactly how many vertices you would like to have on a specific spline. And this gives you the ability to use the new Spline Morph tool. So when we look into the field of motion graphics, this is very important. It can be very important and powerful, that you can start, moving across different splines to the auto keying, and there you go. So a lot of these things would have been fairly difficult to manage in the past. Now with the spline tools, this is pretty straightforward to accomplish. The path deform modifier has been updated as well, by the way. So there are multiple things that you can do right in here, which you would not have been able to accomplish before. All right, let's move a little bit forward. Here's the same spline experience in conjunction with the particle flow. So fairly easy to create these kind of effects out of the box. Right. So this is another, just a brief overview, so you get the idea of how flexible the spline tools really are. This is a spline influencer that we're using here in conjunction with the influencer space warp. And what we can do by that, for example, we can start transforming splines on the fly. So when we create something like that, which is basically the same spline, but in the modifier stack, we have a sweep modifier that creates a geometry. Now, with that space warp here, we can create effects like that. If you link that up to that, there we go. There we go. If you link that up to that little card here, there you go. You can create effects like that are non-destructive, meaning that you can come in at any time because it's all stored in the modifier stack. You can have full art direction control over what you're doing, and can customize these kind of animations on the fly as well. Cool. Yeah, this is a spline twisting. So creating wires like that is doable. You can create multi-sub-object materials based on spline sections. So blend between different materials and so on. That's all fairly doable. This is a quick and brief example of shape Booleans. So using it's part of that spline modifier process that we have. So now we have Booleans for shapes with subtractions and unifications and so on. And because as part of the Boolean, as soon as it's part of the modifier of the Boolean modifier, you can come into the base splines and start modifying, playing around with those. So even animating, right? Animations like this can be done very, very easily. And because it is now a spline, we can add a shell or an extrusion modifier, sweep modifier on top of that and create 3D geometry and still drive the original geometry and animation based on that shape Boolean. I hope that makes sense. So here we're seeing the Beveled profile editor, which by the way comes with different Beveled profile templates, which you can customize and you can share. We share these with your colleagues as well. Very powerful for 3D text as well. And here we go. All right. So I'm not going to touch down on like every of these videos. What I want to tell you and show you is the chamfering, though. The chamfer modifier and the chamfer capabilities inside of 3ds Max have been updated drastically over the last 2 years, and we kept working on those. So the chamfer modifier, the chamfer functionalities inside of 3ds Max are now known to be best in class across the industry. So it has tons of functionality in here. If I can show you this video, you will probably see that some of the shortcomings of the previous chamfer modifier are kind of obvious. Like if you look at this, hopefully, can you see my mouse cursor? I hope so. If you see it, look at this area or this area, this chamfer, actually like the traditional one, would give you a not unpredictable results, so to speak, in certain circumstances. So now there are several new ways and types to do your chamfering. One's the fixed chamfer that gives you a very predictable outcome, very smooth chamfering across the whole geometry, and you can control the way things are getting chamfered in numerous ways, actually. And this is very important, right, for product design as well as for game modeling. The chamfering is a very crucial thing to have for hard surface modeling within any 3D tool. What's cool about the chamfering here is that you can create your chamfer settings and you can reuse them. So that means that within the chamfer modifier, there are presets which you can store and load from, and reuse your chamfer settings out of the box. So here we've been filtering based on the face angles. We said, okay, only up until a certain angle we want to create a chamfer, or vice versa. There's inverted chamfering, like a depth amount, which you can add to the chamfer modifier right here. And as I said before, working with presets can be very powerful. So if we create just a face selection and we add the chamfer on top of that and say, okay, please use the borders of these faces, it's very, very easy to create kind of an inset here with the chamfer modifier and reuse that as a template for other selections, or modify your selections, so to speak, and it will automatically put the chamfer setting on top of that. Right. So now with the most recent version of 3ds Max, there have been further chamfer improvements, as I mentioned before. One of the big things that we've added is the chamfer previously has only been available, like the new chamfering has only been available as a modifier. Now you can go onto the editable poly base level of your topology, and you have the same chamfer metering types available right there. Also, preserving your UVs when using the chamfer modifier has been updated drastically, so this has been improved quite a bit. You can see it on a more simplified mesh with the depth amount and kind of preserving your UVs. And we had very, very positive feedback on that chamfering. If you haven't touched down on that yet, make sure you don't miss out on it. I know with 3ds Max, a product that has been around for quite some time now, you might sometimes just miss things that Autodesk has been adding over the years. So chamfer is definitely a thing that you would benefit from when having a look at it. There's also a new weighted to normal modifier. So this one actually improves or helps you to improve the shading or the over shading of your models by altering the vertex normals. And there's a blending modifier, there's a smoothing amount, and what's very important here, and what works very well, is a snap to largest face setting. So if you have big faces on a hard surface model, you will automatically have the vertex normals being weighted accordingly. If you have more like a spherical, or I guess a more organic shape, that might not work too well. But then again, there's this blending amount, and you can do the weight normals based on your UVs or your let's see, yeah, your smoothing groups. There we go. And you get very good results for your for your overall look of the geometry based on that. Awesome. Right. So that was modeling. Let's have a look at rendering and shading. This is kind of my not my final topic, but this is a big one. And after that, we will have a look at some of the pipeline advantages inside of 3ds Max. So rendering and shading. Let's start with open shading language. The support of OSL has been added 2-3 years ago into 3ds Max. Vera is fully compatible to OSL. Arnold is fully compatible to OSL. Other renderers are as well. And what's beautiful about that, because it's an open shading language, most of these OSL shaders would be compatible to other third-party tools or other DCCs, such as Maya or Houdini as well, right? So you get the same kind of transforms and controls in these other tools as you would get inside of 3ds Max. We're shipping with a quite a big library of different OSLs which you can use and leverage inside of 3ds Max. This is a quick example here where we are adding an OSL shader to randomize a texture output or a material within 3ds Max. So all what we're doing here is we're adding these different JPEGs which we've created out of a PSD file, and we are adding those to an OSL randomization node. So there we go. Now we have input 1 to I think 8. I think where we're ending 1 to 6. Okay, adding this into our color mixer. And now we're adding a node handle, which would tell 3ds Max or tell the product how to pick which texture to choose from, right? So now we're adding, all we're doing here is we're assigning that material onto all of our boxes here or containers here. And you can see in the rendering, this is getting updated accordingly. So this is 3ds Max 2019. Bear in mind that we've added viewport functionalities to OSL in the past as well. So now with the 3ds Max 2021, you should be able to preview all of your OSL shaders, like 99% of your OSL shaders within the viewport as well. Here's another quick example on how to use OSL shading to randomize textures and positioning of textures and decals, I guess, on your geometry and your environment design. So the beauty about using kind of procedural workflows for your materials lays in the, is that a word, art directivity? So you can still come in here, or your art director can come into the scene, and you can start working it and go through different variations of your designs very, very, very quickly. If that's your art director or your customer, doesn't really matter too much. But the fact is that you stay very flexible throughout your production, which is a beautiful thing to have. By the way, here's another example of OSL channel packing. So this is more like a gaming term people are using. So they are using data maps into and put them into red, green, and blue channel. And in order to unpack that inside of 3ds Max, we can use OSL. This has not been possible before. So in order to preview a channel-packed PBR material, you would have to put it into Engine, into Unity, into Unreal, or any other real-time engine in order to see how things are behaving. All right. So we've been updating the defaults. When you first start 3ds Max 2021, you get the Arnold renderer as the new default. You get physical materials as the new default, and so on. But what if you wouldn't want to render that much? What if you're more into games or real-time workflows, so to speak? For these kind of people and workflows, we've been adding simplified PBR materials. And these simplified PBR materials give you exactly what you need for your game engine, and not an overall or overly complex PBR material for rendering, but more something for real-time usage. So we have our albedo, our specular, our roughness, maybe your AO map if you wanted to bake that down as well, and your normal maps. And that's that. You might want to add your opacity or your cutout map, but this is that. And this is exactly how PBR materials work and how they behave inside of real-time engines as well. Right. All right. So this is a bit of a mashup, this very slide, between OSL improvements and viewport improvements as well. Just a second here. All right, so let's have a look here. This is utilizing an HDR environment into your viewport background. And with that OSL shader, you can pick from an high dynamic range image as a background, and you can basically adjust it directly inside of the viewport without having to pre-render anything. So this is truly what you see is what you get, right? We also have a ground projection, which basically plants that environment onto the ground, and you have your product, your car, your robot, doesn't matter. You make it appear really standing on that environment. There are some HDRs that work better with that kind of projection, and some that might not work very well, right? But you see, what do you have here? You have full control, you have color correction right built in here. Everything works in real time. This is another one. This is, well, using HDRs to light up your scene. But instead of just using your basic HDRs, what you can also do is use HDR lights. So here we have an OSL shader, which represents these HDR lights, which you can then move around in your scene as kind of point helpers. You can use align functionalities in order to really customize the highlights and how those should be placed on your geometry. And what we have here, just to make you aware on how accurate these kind of representations are. On the right hand side, you see the active shade rendering with Arnold at this point. On the left hand side, you see your perspective viewport displaying all of these capabilities in real time. Fantastic. Let's have out of that. Here we see the color correction OSL. As I said before, we're shipping with tons of OSL shaders, and all of these are compatible to your renderer. No matter if you're using V-Ray or Corona or Arnold, you should be able to leverage the power of OSL right out of the box. And this one, by the way, with these OSLs and color corrections, we have a video on that, which is a play pass out of the viewport with that Nike shoe. And play plus are very important, as you know, right? If you talk to your customer and you want to get approval on a certain animation, especially motion graphics and advertising commercials, you want to work with play plus and not having to render your first draft over hours or days, but you want to give your customer, a very good representation on how things are looking like and how the timing is, and et cetera, and so on. And with these new viewport capabilities, you're able to do that kind of nicely, right? So these kind of previews can be created very, very fast, or Play Plus can be created very fast with the OSL support, with the new viewport capabilities, without having to touch on GPU rendering, on CPU rendering, on offline rendering at all. All right, cool. Doing a quick time check here. I think we're still good on time. This is just a heads up. Especially for the game industries and those who are working with real-time engines, Substance support is has been updated drastically inside of 3ds Max. So Adobe Algorithmic, they have been updating the Substance plugin into something that's called Substance 2. And this supports the latest and greatest Substance functionalities and is much, much faster to display and work on inside of 3ds Max out of the box, right? So we're shipping the latest version of that plugin, but if there were any plugin updates, you can get those from the Adobe Algorithmic website and install onto one of the latest versions of 3ds Max as well. Here we have an 8K support for the Substance map being displayed inside of the Slate Material Editor. Everything can be set up automatically for V-Ray or Corona or Arnold with the new Substance plugin as well. Speaking of Arnold, so I'm not sure which renderer people are using who are watching this, like if you're on V-Ray or maybe an older version of 3ds Max and using Mentoray or Corona. That's all okay. That's all good and well. Just making you aware that there's a new version of Arnold in town, which is Arnold 6, and Arnold is the new default renderer that we're shipping with inside of 3ds Max, right? And it has been, like super production proven, been used in dozens of big movie productions, as you can see here. And the way 3ds Max has been implementing Arnold over the last 2 years has been like super positive and very, very efficient. They've been adding a new AOV manager. AOV is kind of the render elements of Arnold. So you can manage and create your render layers, which you want to render out of Arnold with that AOV manager inside of 3ds Max. So that's kind of a new UI that you have right there. As soon as you create your OpenEXR files or your render layers, you have then full control in Nuke or After Effects or any other post effects software to fully customize your render outcome. There we go. So there's a light group manager of Arnold as well. And as soon as we render, which I think we do over here, you can now switch and blend between these different layers, whichever you have defined in your AOV manager. So just saying, this is a very powerful thing to have right there. Now, given that a lot of people are using 3ds Max for motion graphics as well, I want to kind of underline the functionalities of the Arnold GPU rendering, which has one thing in mind, and that's speed and productivity, right? So whether you're using that for design visualization, a quick viewport, or rendering preview, or for final frame, it doesn't matter too much. All you have to know is that this is an NVIDIA-only functionality. So that's kind of important to bear in mind. And it takes full benefit from the RTX chipset. So if you have a Quattro RTX or a NVIDIA GeForce RTX graphic board, you will have drastic speed improvements out of that. Now, what's also important, as soon as you think about using Arnold GPU, what's super cool about the implementation they've done here is that they are aiming, and they've currently they're achieving it. They're aiming for pixel compatibility, so pixel parity between CPU and GPU rendering. So at any point in time, you can go, okay, this is getting too complex for my graphic board. I have to do kind of offline rendering, or I need to send it to my CPU render farm. And then you would not have to re-render everything, but you would be able to mix up these different shots between a GPU rendered shot and a CPU rendered shot. Right? So that's very important. It's fairly easy to set up. You basically just go into your Arnold renderer into system and to say, okay, I want to render with the GPU instead of the CPU. There is no hybrid rendering at that point, but yeah, once again, so you go either CPU or GPU, but you can switch back and forth, right? Without losing your materials. There's no like GPU material, which you have to convert back and forth between CPU rendering and GPU rendering. You just take what's there, including OSL, by the way. OSL has been added as being a compatible GPU rendering functionality inside of Arnold and 3ds Max. And this gives you very, very fast results. So when you're working with a viewport, that's fantastic. But if you wanted to add extra believability and you really want to see what your final frame would look like, you kick in your active shade based on or accelerate with GPU rendering, and you should be good to go. This is another example of using Arnold GPU in the field of design visualization, interior design. It's basically the same workflow here. So you were customizing Arnold Lights, and you were getting the feedback inside of the active shade on the left-hand side. Cool. There are some more advantages of GPU, which I will tell you about in a second. But first of all, I want to give you some comparisons on the same machine. So we have on the left-hand side a CPU rendering, which took 15 minutes, and kind of the same results on the right-hand side. Well, if you can tell the difference, you tell me, but I really can't. On the right-hand side, 1/3 of the time, 5 minutes and, well, 37 seconds, right? There are even better results when you powered up with RTX functionalities. Once again, if you have an NVIDIA RTX chipset, then your speed results are getting better and better and better, right? So here we have the CPU, 6 minutes on the left-hand side. We have the RTX, we had 40 seconds. And the RTX with a more, I'm not even sure, like raised up quality settings up at 2 minutes and 38 seconds. So these are better quality settings that you have on the CPU right there, but you still are like at 50% or 45% of the time. Here's another one, GPU rendering on the left-hand side, 1 minute, and with GPU rendering and RTX on the right-hand side, 26 seconds. GPU left-hand side, 1 minute, 10 seconds. GPU with RTX, right-hand side, 37 seconds. All right, so you get the idea. Okay. Now, some extra benefit that you can get out of using the GPU is the optics denoiser. NVIDIA optics denoiser. It's a machine learning based denoiser, which does an incredible job of taking your active shade, which is still render in progress, and clearing it up just like that. Like this is not a sped up video which you see here, but it actually starts as a very noisy rendering, and then it clears up like that. This is not for finer frame. This is more like a kind of preview on, okay, how's my lighting? How is the material? Is everything in place? Is everything okay? And then for finer frame rendering, you probably use the Arnold denoiser at the very end. Right. There's another one for design visualization. It's incredible. All right. So taking out my last minutes here. Arnold plugins are available for Maya and Max, obviously, but there are also Arnold plugins available for kind of the rest of the industry, whether that's Cinema 4D or Blender or Houdini. You can use Arnold in any of these tools. So that's the beauty about owning an Arnold license in the kind of the media and entertainment collections, which ships with 5 Arnold licenses. I'm not trying to sell anything here, just saying that this is kind of crucial, that Arnold is not differentiating between a Maya Arnold or like an Arnold render node does not differentiate between. I'm not only compatible with Arnold. I cannot render with Houdini, or I'm only compatible with Maya or Max. No, you can render with your Arnold render node. You can render for any of these software packages that are out there. All right. Oh, I forgot about fluids. Okay, this is a quick one, very brief. So we have been adding Bifrost fluids into 3ds Max. Use them if you want to do fluids. Kind of the messaging behind that is that there is, if you had a look at Maya, that there is a Bifrost 2 with a kind of a Bifrost graph, and you can use it for motion graphics and visual effects. So with that in mind, that's not in Max yet, but it might be. It might be. So if you're on the beta of 3ds Max, you can have a look at some of the research and developments that we're working on. If you want to be part of that, make sure that you register. If you're happy to do some fluid simulations or visualizations inside of 3ds Max, rest assured that it is fairly easy to do with the use of templates. As you can see here, you can create sound-driven effects like that. So we don't hear sound here, but there is a sound file underneath that animation. And of course, there's like traditional fluids as well. Awesome. So that's that. Let me wrap it up with a pipeline, with a couple of pipeline slides. This is more for those who are bringing in data, especially for the architects, right? So the Revit Importer has been drastically upgraded over the last years. You don't need to upgrade your Revit file if you have that Revit, I don't know, 2017 installed on your machine. You want to import that into the current version of 3ds Max. It imports that out of the box. You have better conversions and compatibility to your IES lights, your daylight systems that come out of Revit and you want to put into 3ds Max. So that's that. And what's kind of very important as well, it is much faster than it was in the past. So that was one of the speed improvements we did. 12 seconds for that run in one of the updates of 3ds Max and 35 seconds before, right? SketchUp Importer has been updated. Alembic support has been brought up to the latest standard. So if you're working with other studios or on a multi-software studio, some are working on Houdini, some are working on Blender or Maya, you can use Alembic as a kind of a rest assured file format to bring animation data back and forth between these different products and use those to render, for example, inside of 3ds Max, but you want to animate your simulation inside of Houdini and then bring it back in. You can do all of that. It's also much faster playback. So old playback, 1 frame, 2 frames. Now Alembic cache on the right hand side, up to 40 frames per second. So Alembic file cache file playback is fairly fast inside of 3ds Max as well. All right. So these are this is actually my last slide. There's a scene converter in Max. Has been there for 2-3 years. But the scene converter has been updated as well. So you are now able to, for example, go from Corona to Arnold or V-Ray to Arnold or Arnold to V-Ray. So if you want to try out some of your scenes with any of these renderers, use the Arnold's, use the 3ds Max scene converter to jump back and forth. Python 3 support is inside of 3ds Max, which is great for bigger studios and pipeline compatibility. The installation process and the startup time has been kind of slimmed down and sped up quite a bit inside of 3ds Max 2021. And there has been a texture baking overhaul, which we didn't touch on today, but we might in a future video. Yeah, these are the kind of the 5 bullet points: viewports, renderings, modeling, texture baking, and general updates for 3ds Max 2021. If you have any questions, please feel free to put them into the chat or the Q&A panel. I'm around for the next, 25, 30 minutes, and I will hand it over to Greg, who's going to give you an overview on their usage of 3ds Max and what kind of products they're doing. I want to thank you very much for your time. and wish you all a good day. I'm going to stop my screen share now so Craig can start sharing his. Thank you.
Hi there, guys. I hope you can hear me okay.
Yep, all good.
Good stuff. My name's Greg Cook. I'm working with an agency called XFacta. It's a traditional design agency running out of Sandhurst in Johannesburg. And I've been working with them for about 5 years or so. They have come quite a long way from a standard design agency and now have embraced a lot of the sort of 3D and the motion graphics side of the business. I think the best is to just jump straight in, and I'm on the clock here a little bit, but what I'm going to take you through is a couple of projects that we have worked together with, so it'll be a designer and 3D modeling and rendering inside 3D Max and using the tools around it, just to give you an idea of what our workflow is and how we achieve this. One of our clients, Accenture, came to us and said we need to quite urgently create a stand, an exhibition stand in Dubai, which literally was going to happen in a few weeks' time. And if we could come up with the concepts and get the idea going as quickly as possible. So here we took them through the design ideas started from quite a basic print on surface to a kitchen idea which had a physical kitchen actually built in across to where we had LCD panels which we would play content on in the background. So the idea was to try and test these ideas with a client. Each time we came up with a concept, we'd do maybe 1 or 2 concepts, run them past the client, and they would give us feedback. And you'll see as I go through these images over here, these little thumbnails, the concept developed further and further, and we got closer and closer to sort of our final design. We had quite a battle towards the end to try and figure out. We loved the idea of this massive LCD panel in the background, the screen, which we could run content on. But what we ended up doing is having to enclose a little technical area in the middle, sandwich it between a print area in the back and the screens in the front. So that is the final design. I'll go through that in a minute, but I just wanted to let you know the workflow for me was quite interesting. We had straight into 3D Max to build models and build concepts. And what I'd do is I'd work hand in hand with either the designer or myself, and we would create texture maps inside Illustrator. We'd name our artboards and have specific folders that 3D Max was pulling from. So any designs that were changed would be automatically exported and then interactively updated inside 3D Max. So you'd always see the latest designs, and you'd be able to, on the fly, interactively change the designs. I'll talk about the construction drawing afterwards, but I just wanted to show you the final version, which is the massive LCD screen in the background, the greater than symbol interactive desk, and then an seating area and kind of like a podium on the right-hand side. I've got a little video which I'd just like to show you quickly. So this is the actual stand itself, which had motion graphics running in the background on the screens, and it had sort of like an interactive area that you could use some VR tools, and people would be able to help you with your questions. The actual final stand, and I'll just play a little bit of this. I hope you guys stand. And the way that we did it, by the way, is we took the 3D Max model, rendered it up, and created technical drawings from it. So this is literally renderings out of 3D Max brought into Illustrator for dimensioning and some notations. This was handed over to their builder in Dubai, and from these drawings, they built it exactly as it is. And that's the kind of the final version. Great stuff. So, moving on to the next project, one of our clients, Fujitsu, approached us with a new concept, co-create. We wanted to roll out a new name and new identity for this. What we did is we had the co-create identity was, we developed the double C, so a C that was slightly turned off axis. And that then became the language, the 3D language that we used to develop an icon for them. As you can see, it's quite a, there's very, very subtle changes in the actual geometry which goes around. And the idea is that it's best viewed from this angle on the right over here. But it's these two intersecting C's with a very, very well-considered junction over there. This is just an example of how it would possibly be a sculpture in front of a building, and the final identity is this over here. So I also have a video of that just to show you the motion graphics version of that. So the idea is to use it as a brand mark and a device that would be able to move and change, and the backplate as well, also all rendered with a very similar kind of treatment of an infinity kind of mark. Great. The next project I'd like to show you, one of our clients, Investec, we've approached them for looking or redeveloping a language for them. This is the Learning and Development Program, and we developed a set of backplates that could be used as design elements in areas where I took a model of a zebra that we had developed and updated for this specifically, and then the idea was to just use the shadows as graphic devices. And I think it's quite a beautiful idea where you can take something that is geometry and just use the shadow as graphic devices. So you can zoom in and use areas and crop into areas that just show specific treatment. This is the second half of the project where we used an ampersand, and sort of an and sign, and developed a 3D structure which was able to have a graphic element across it. The bands of color between black and white are pulled from the Investec's language, which they've gone for that sort of zebra patterning. And the idea here is that we would create something that would live in a white space, and the white would disappear entirely, and you would end up with the black graphic lines that you could then also bring in colors. These black panels would represent either industries or components or divisions that they would have. I've got a little animation of that just to show you it in motion, so you can get an idea of how it could be used as well. And this, when we presented this to the client, it was the first time they'd kind of seen any of this. They really loved the idea of this being used as a graphic device, and it has so much more potential to be used in so many different ways, from print to social media, animation, motion graphics. Great stuff. One of our biggest 3D clients that we have is King Price, and they actually really enjoy pushing the boundaries and playing with a lot of their ideas, and they let us loose a little bit every now and then, and it's great. They've asked us to make a concept for Price is King. We came up with a marching band idea where the little characters would actually march in and present the idea, and it's all in a sort of a fun way, and in this really magical world that we created. So our initial design concept, very flat design work, which was just used as a quick test on the concept. They loved it. We went straight into character development. Every single one of the letters, a huge amount of time was spent on developing a personality for each of the little pieces. They would have their own unique clothing. They would have a little peculiar walk or a mannerism or a twitch that they would have. Some would be confident, some would be get a fright and fall over. And it was actually great fun doing this. This gives you an idea of the environment that they lived in, just some of the meshes, and the rigging system was CAT, and it was actually quite easy to develop a little unique walk for each of them and to have them follow the terrain. Let me actually show you the video. The environment was specifically set in this kind of modeling, this exist in their own like special place. There was trees, mountains developed, clouds, a massive panorama that they could exist in. So got a couple of minutes, but just to take you a few of the other King Price projects that we did, just to show you how nicely that we were able to push with a lot of 3D Max work, where this was just showing cell phone insurance and how you can have a bit of fun with building some quick characters, and this would then be able to be used on social media campaigns and also just collateral, just showing the insurance. Again, a little cursor was developed as a device which would then put in a print campaign, and he is kind of like amongst this coins and cash that's falling down from the air. We carried on and on with this same concept of this sort of wooden painted toy world, which we could then use as both a rendering for print and also for motion graphics. Another use of the 3D Max modeling and rendering for conceptual ideas, they wanted to put a sign in front of the building. So we developed this King Price sculpture, which became a seating area, and that was turned into technical drawings, and it was then built exactly as per the models, and I think we were very happy with the end result. A couple more projects over here. This was a billboard campaign rendered out of 3D Max at 20,000 pixels wide. The idea was to be able to stretch across the highway. The print resolution really had to be super high, and even that, by the way, wasn't quite enough for a 30 or a 40 meter billboard, but I'm sure you've seen this floating around on the highways or billboards around, but the idea is also to bring in graphic elements in and around it. A similar campaign, this was taking the King Price crown and making a badge out of it, bringing in the South African kind of feel to it. On the left, just the render, and then just touching it up inside Photoshop. Again, massively high, 25,000 odd pixel by 25,000 pixel render. It's a pity I can't actually show you in it, but it had this beautiful satin finish on the ribbon, and the detail in the actual crusting on the gold and the fabric of the flag. So the idea that even though a lot of billboards are printed at fairly low res, this was able to accommodate some massive print out campaign. And then just last project over here, our Price is King characters came back for a version 2 when the Lion King was re-released in South Africa. We decided we'd do our own little campaign with the little P bringing out the crown and holding it up on Pride Rock for everybody. So it was just a quirky little last project. I think I'm going to call it at this, but some vehicle branding that we've got going here. Also amazingly easy in 3D Max, working with Illustrator, where updating maps constantly inside Illustrator, which real-time changes the viewports in 3D Max. So either myself or one of the other designers would work in Illustrator, and we'd work off a folder and be able to update and change and look at intersections and junctions and move things around in real time. It's really great. That's pretty much it. Welcome to visit our website, xfacta.coza, and there's our Instagram link as well. Thanks very much. That's me. Stacey, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I don't think there is any, there was a question, and then the question has disappeared. It was basically about a ArchiCAD, or was it ArchiSoft into 3ds Max, the best workflow. I don't quite remember what the question was. Do you remember what the question was there, Alex? Did you see anything about that particular question in Q&A?
Oh, I was on mute. Yeah, I did answer it actually. So the reason it moved away, it moved to the other like answers slot, and it was, how do I get ArchiCAD or ArchiCAD data into 3ds Max? And I guess the best answer would be to try out one of the 3 file formats: Google Sketchup, which you can export out of Graphisoft. You can export DWG, and you can export FBX, and all of these 3 file formats can be imported into 3ds Max. So I would give that a spin. I wouldn't experiment with the very, very old and outdated 3ds file format, which is still being recommended these days, but it's like a 30-year-old file format. So I would leave that aside and try those FBX, SketchUp, DWGs first.
Okay.
That's that.
Is there any other questions or comments from the attendees?
Are there any developments on using AMD GPUs? There was a question on that. Well, currently, I'm assuming that is aiming for for the use of Arnold GPU and AMD graphic boards. I know that AMD as well as NVIDIA is in touch with Autodesk, so we're sharing and exchanging technologies. But I believe that currently Arnold is focusing on doubling down on the NVIDIA support there. So there's nothing around the corner yet for on that side.
Great. I don't think there's anything left. No, there's no more questions. There's the general chat. Nope. They're impressed with the presentation, which is great. Thank you for that. Please remember, if there's anything you need to know, would like to see in future webinars, please email me. It's Stacey at